matter if we're talking about shooting or we're talking about leather work or we're talking about something that you really truly want to get good at. It's important to learn the basics and master the basic skills. Let's talk about stamping, let's talk about stitching, let's talk about cutting, let's talk about patterns, and let's build a pattern and let's cut the leather for it. We have the luxury here of actually having the wallet with us, but if this was just a wallet that we saw a picture of, we're going to try and figure out an easy way to make this. So this is a typical minimal wallet, and it fits a card. It's one piece, and it's just a bit bigger than a credit card. So it's pretty simple in terms of a pattern. So you can tell on one side you've got a half moon shape cut out of it, and the other side almost has a half moon shape cut out of it. So what I do is probably if I saw a picture of this, I would sketch it just like I'm doing here. And on one side basically it's got a half moon shape, and the other side right down the center line of it is actually a circle. So that's pretty much the bare bones of the pattern. So then what I would skip to on here is I would say, okay, how big does this wallet need to be? What are my dimensions? So it needs to be just big enough so it fits my credit card without being really big. It needs to basically have a stitch line on both sides. So you see right here, I basically say, okay, that's how big it is going to be lengthwise, or how wide it's going to be. And there's halfway on it. So there we go. So I've got the whole dimensions of it right there. It's one big rectangle. That's my start. Okay, so if I measure the length versus width on this, it's 66 millimeters by 184 millimeters. So then what I want to do is find the half line of this, or the center line of it. So I do 66 divided by 2 equals 33 millimeters, that is center. And for the other half, 184 divided by 2, 92. Okay, so then I mark those. And I like using this kind of paper. It's graph paper, and each one of those little squares represents 1/4 of an inch. So even though I'm working in metric right now, sometimes I also work in imperial and I flip back and forth. This paper just happens to be an imperial, which really doesn't matter for me at this point. It's just important that I have horizontal and vertical lines. And I love this little circle template I got. And so when I'm done, I'm going to mark my circles, and I just happen to have this template for marking circles, which comes in super handy when you're trying to make everything centered. It only cost me a couple dollars actually, and it's great for doing not only patterns, but especially challenge coins. So I just release the whole pattern. And then what I want to do is just do a quick mock-up and say, okay, is this exactly where I want it? Because I can always change it at any point here. And this is just to get the first initial pattern piece down. So I'm happy with it. So then I take a piece of cardboard. So this isn't thick cardboard, that's your typical corrugated piece of cardboard. This is thin. So what we want to do is just do the exact same thing as we did with the paper. We're just doing it on thicker paper. So we want to knock out our lines for our rectangle and then work on the rest. So now that we've got that pattern, we're just looking at a shape. Our shape's a rectangle. So I use points. I use a point maker and awl. This just happens to be a Viking eating picker that I was gifted from Grimfrost. And I mark the rectangles, and then I also mark a number of dots. It doesn't really matter where they are to mark my half circles. And the reason I like those is they're actually more accurate. It's the concept of aim small, miss small. So let's cut it out. So first of all, I cut my rectangle pattern. And we cut it out completely. I'll do another video on cutting, and I'll do another one on stitching too. So just in case it's kind of hard to see on there, here's a rough idea of where my half circle and my circle are for my regular pattern. And then I have a number of circles. This one I bought probably off Amazon. So let's cut them. So I made that hammer piece that fits over top of my chisel, and I hammer those out. See, and that took me about 10 seconds. So I check my pattern, and my pattern looks great. Take my circle, and here I start cutting leather. So the first thing that I do is I make that straight line on the straight edge, and I'm going to cut out that rectangle shape first. So what I want to do is make a 90-degree angle, and then I take my template and with my picker. So here I mark the circles, and I either use points or I use scribing. For long straight edges I usually use points because it's more accurate. Then I'll use maybe a combination when I'm doing the circles. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to cut out my rectangle. So I use those points I made. Make sure my blade is straight, my ruler isn't moving. I cut out my rectangle. Now we cut out the circles in the exact spot that I scribed and put points for. This leather is pretty thin, so it didn't take much to get through it. Now when we fold it over, but just looking at the finalized product here, we're going to take the corners off. There we go. So we're going to fit it for the card just to see if we get a feel for if it's right or not. And then we'd go on to the next stage of production, which would probably be doing a little bit of edging, doing some finishing, or maybe doing some dyeing, but we'll do that in another video. And that's it. Easy. So I keep all of mine in folders like this. This is a minimum 2 wallet, it's called. I keep everything together. Thanks for watching, and I hope you try it out.